Let me say something that's going to sound completely backwards. And I want you to stay with me because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why it's true. Stopping yourself from loving someone is not the goal. That's right, you heard me. Every article, every podcast, every well-meaning friend telling you to just stop loving him, they are giving you advice that goes against how the human brain actually works. And following that advice, it's one of the reasons you're still stuck. Because you cannot simply switch off love. That's not how emotion works. That's not how you work. But here's what you can do and what nobody is telling you. You can stop feeding it. You can stop watering a plant you've already decided you're never going to keep. And that right there is the real conversation we need to have today. Before we go any further, I want to draw a very clear line because this entire conversation depends on you understanding one distinction. Love and a relationship are not the same thing. I'm going to say that again. Love and a relationship are not the same thing. A relationship is a structure. It's an agreement, a partnership, a set of choices two people make every single day. Love, on the other hand, is an internal experience. It lives inside you. It doesn't require permission. It doesn't require reciprocity, and it absolutely does not require logic. This matters because the reason most people struggle to stop loving someone is that they're trying to do something that isn't actually possible. They're trying to surgically remove an emotion as if it were a splinter. And every time that doesn't work, they feel broken. They feel weak. They think something is wrong with them. But nothing is wrong with you. You fell in love. That's a human thing. The question is never, how do I stop loving him? The real question, the question that will actually set you free is, how do I stop living for someone I cannot build a life with? That's the reframe. That's what this entire video is about. Because here's the thing people get wrong about this situation. They focus all their energy on the emotion and none of their energy on the behavior. They try to feel differently before they act differently, but it actually works the other way around. You change your actions first, the feelings follow. Let me show you exactly how. The first thing we need to talk about is why this is so hard. And I'm not asking that as a surface question. I mean, we need to go underneath it. Because if you understand the mechanism, you can actually work with it instead of fighting it. Here's the truth. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a real relationship and an imagined one. Think about that. The same neural circuits that fire when you're in a committed, reciprocated relationship, they also fire when you are hoping for one. When you're imagining a future with someone, when you're replaying conversations and analyzing every text, your brain is processing all of that as if it were real. And this is why intermittent reinforcement, those hot and cold moments, those occasional crumbs of affection is so devastatingly powerful. Because every time he gave you even a small signal, your brain released dopamine. Not because something real was happening, but because your brain was anticipating a reward. Think of it like a slot machine. You know how people can sit at a slot machine for hours, losing money, unable to walk away? It's not because they're stupid. It's because the slot machine is designed to give unpredictable, inconsistent rewards. And unpredictable rewards you can't predict, create stronger neurological dependency than consistent ones. That's science. That's not a character flaw. That's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. So if this man, for whatever reason, was never fully available to you, whether he was taken, emotionally unavailable, geographically impossible, or the timing was simply never right. The fact that it never became something solid didn't make your love less real. In some ways, the incompleteness is exactly what made the feeling so intense, because your brain was always anticipating, always hoping, always waiting for the slot machine to pay out. I was talking to a woman a while back, let's call her Priya, and she had been in love with her colleague for nearly 2 years. Nothing had ever officially happened between them. A few late nights at work, a few meaningful conversations, one moment in a parking lot where she thought he was about to kiss her. That was it. And yet she was more attached to this man than she had been to a boyfriend she actually dated for 18 months. When we dug into it, the answer was clear. The relationship that existed in her mind had no flaws. He had never disappointed her in the full way a real partner can. He had never been boring, never been selfish, never forgotten an anniversary. He existed in a perfect, protected bubble, completely shaped by her imagination. And that's the first practical insight I want you to sit with. What you love might not be entirely him. It might be the version of him that lives in your mind. The version that never had the chance to become ordinary. The version you built in the space of what could have been. And recognizing that, really recognizing it, is the first crack in the wall. The mindset shift here is this: your feelings are completely valid, but they may not be a completely accurate reflection of reality. They are, at least partly, a reflection of what you wanted reality to be. That's not a bad thing. That's a very human thing. But it does mean you have more agency in this than you think. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And this might sting a little, but I say it with love. There's a difference between loving someone and being addicted to them. And a lot of people who believe they're experiencing the former are actually trapped in the latter. Real love, mature, healthy love, can hold someone's best interests above your own desire to be with them. It can say, I care about this person deeply and I want good things for them, even if I'm not in the picture. That's love. What I see more often though, and I'm not judging, I've seen this in some of the strongest, most intelligent people I've worked with, is something that looks more like obsession. It's the constant checking of his social media. It's the way every song reminds you of him. It's the inability to sit in a room quietly without your thoughts drifting back to him. It's the jealousy when you hear he's moved on. It's needing to know, needing what he's doing, who he's with, whether he ever thinks about you. That's not love. That's withdrawal. And just like a person who's withdrawing from a substance, the answer is never try harder to feel less. The answer is to interrupt the patterns that keep the cycle going. Let me give you an analogy. You know how people talk about quitting sugar? Everyone who's tried it says the first week is brutal. Headaches, cravings, irritability. But here's what they also say. The cravings aren't about the sugar itself. They're about the habit loops around the sugar. The 3 p.m. slump that triggers reaching for something sweet. The stress that triggers the craving. The association between finishing dinner and having dessert. Once they break the habit loop, the craving loses its grip. The sugar didn't become less sweet. The need just stopped being so loud. That's exactly what this is. The loops you need to identify and interrupt are things like checking his Instagram right before bed, listening to the playlist you associate with him when you're already feeling low, replaying the almost moments in your head when you're bored, texting a mutual friend to find out how he's doing, every one of those behaviors is a loop. And every time you complete the loop, you reinforce the attachment. So the practical step here is deceptively simple, but brutally difficult in practice. Map your loops. Write them down. What are the triggers? What's the behavior that follows? And what reward does your brain think it's getting? Then, one by one, you replace the behavior. Not suppress it, replace it. Same trigger, different response. Because your brain will always try to close the loop. Give it something else to close it with. I was coaching a young woman named Amara recently. She was in love with a man who was engaged to someone else. She knew it was over. She accepted it intellectually. But every Sunday morning specifically, she would spiral. She'd lie in bed, her mind would go there. She'd spend 3 hours lost in grief and fantasy. We figured out the trigger quickly. Sunday mornings have been their time. Coffee, lazy mornings, long conversations. Her brain had tagged Sunday mornings as his time. So instead of fighting the feeling, we replaced the behavior. She started a Sunday morning walk with a friend every single Sunday. And within 6 weeks, the spiral was gone. Not because she'd stopped caring, but because she'd broken the loop. The takeaway here, stop trying to fight the feeling and start disrupting the habit. The emotion will follow the behavior, not the other way around. Now, let me address something that almost every person in this situation believes, and that almost always makes things worse. The idea that you need closure to move on. I hear it constantly. I just need to talk to him one more time. If I could just understand why it didn't work out. If he could just tell me what he's feeling, I could let go. And look, I understand the impulse. It makes emotional sense. But I'm going to push back hard on this because the data, both psychological research and what I've seen working with hundreds of people, is very clear. Closure from another person almost never provides what you're hoping it will. Here's why. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you decide. Full stop. When you go back to someone seeking closure, what you're actually doing in most cases is giving yourself another hit, another point of contact, another moment where the hope can reignite, even if just for a second. And even if the conversation goes badly, even if he says something hurtful or dismissive, you still reopen the wound. You still re-engage the neural loop. The contact itself is the problem, not the content of the conversation. Think about it this way. Imagine someone who's been sober for 60 days and they go back to where the substance is just to prove they don't need it anymore. That conversation, that visit, that one glass of wine, just to see if I'm over it. You know what happens. Not because the person is weak, but because proximity is powerful. Context is powerful. The environment itself triggers the old neural pathways, and suddenly 60 days of hard work gets unwound in an evening. Closure is something you build, not something you get. And you build it by making a decision, not a feeling, but a decision that this chapter is closed. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't wait until it stops hurting. You decide and you act in alignment with that decision, even when every emotion in your body is pulling in the opposite direction. Here's the counterintuitive insight on this point. The ache you feel, that doesn't mean you're not healing. It just means you're human. People confuse the presence of pain with the absence of progress. But grief and healing are not opposites. They coexist. You can be getting better and still have days where it hits you like a wave. That's not regression, that's recovery. The mindset shift is this: stop looking outward for the ending. You get to write the ending, not him, not the universe, you. And the moment you truly internalize that, the moment that lands not just intellectually but emotionally, everything starts to shift. Here's an angle that almost nobody talks about, and I think it's one of the most important. One of the real reasons it's so hard to stop loving someone you can't be with isn't just about him. It's about who you've become in relation to him. When we love someone deeply, even when that love is unrequited or impossible, they start to become a part of our identity. You think of yourself as someone who loves this person. Your internal narrative, your daydreams, your sense of the future, all of it starts to organize around this love. And when you try to let go of the feeling, you're not just letting go of a person, you're letting go of a whole chapter of who you thought you were going to be. This is incredibly underappreciated, and it explains something I see over and over. People who are completely done with a person on a rational level, who have accepted it's over, who don't even want to be with him anymore, still can't stop thinking about him. Why? Because they haven't yet built the new identity that replaces the one organized around him. There's a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum, so the old attachment rushes back in. Think about an athlete who retires. They've trained their entire life. Every morning, every discipline, every relationship has been structured around the sport. And then one day it's done. And some of the deepest crises in professional sports come from this exact moment. Not because the athlete misses the sport, but because the sport was their entire sense of self. Without it, they don't know who they are. This love you're carrying, if you're honest with yourself, ask, how much of your sense of self has been wrapped up in this? How much of your future did you imagine with him in it? Because letting go of him also means letting go of that version of your future. And that's a grief on its own, separate from the grief of losing him. The practical work here is this: you need to build a new narrative. Not a fake, forced, positive thinking narrative. I'm not asking you to pretend you're fine. I'm asking you to slowly, deliberately start answering the question, who am I, independent of this love? What do I want? What excites me when he's not in the picture? What did I used to care about before this took over? Start there, small, and build outward, because the goal isn't emptiness, the goal is fullness. A fullness that doesn't have a him-shaped hole in the middle of it. I want to close the main content with something really important. A corrected picture of what moving on actually looks like. Because the version most people have in their head is wrong. And that wrong picture is making the process harder than it needs to be. Most people think moving on looks like this. One day you wake up and it doesn't hurt anymore. One day you see his name and feel nothing. One day a new person walks into your life and suddenly everything makes sense and the past just fades. Clean, cinematic, done. That's not moving on. That's a movie. Real moving on is messy. Real moving on is 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's a Wednesday afternoon where you're completely fine, followed by a Saturday morning where it hits you out of nowhere and you cry in the shower. It's having a genuinely great night out, laughing, feeling like yourself again, and then driving home and thinking about him for 40 minutes. That's not failure. That is the actual process. And if nobody told you that, I'm telling you now. Here's the thing people get wrong about the timeline. They expect linear progress. They track themselves against a self-imposed deadline. It's been 3 months, I should be over this by now. And then feel like they're failing when they're not. But grief and attachment don't work on a schedule. What matters isn't how quickly you stop feeling. What matters is whether you're still choosing him, whether you're still showing up at his door emotionally or literally, whether you're still organizing your life around the possibility of him. Moving on is a series of daily decisions before it becomes a feeling. You decide not to check his profile today. You decide to make plans for your Saturday instead of keeping it free on the off chance he reaches out. You decide to invest in the people who are actually present in your life. You make those decisions day after day while the feelings are still doing whatever they're doing. And slowly, without drama, without a clear turning point, you realize one day that the weight is lighter. Not gone, lighter. And then lighter still. I want you to hear this. Loving someone you can never be with is not a character flaw. It is not a sign of weakness. Some of the most extraordinary human beings in history have loved people they couldn't have. That love shaped them. It opened them. It taught them things about themselves they could never have learned otherwise. The question is never whether you should have loved him. The question is whether you're going to allow that love to become the walls of a prison or whether you're going to let it be what it really is, a chapter, a beautiful, painful, real chapter that you now get to turn the page on. So let me bring it all together. You cannot stop loving someone by force, but you can stop feeding a love that has nowhere to go. You do that by understanding the neuroscience of why you're attached, by breaking the habit loops that reinforce the attachment, by releasing the myth that someone else holds your closure, by rebuilding your identity on your own terms, and by allowing the messy, non-linear process of moving on to unfold without judging yourself against an impossible timeline. The love you feel is real, but the life you deserve is also real. And those two things, the love that was and the life that's waiting, they are not in competition. You don't have to stop being someone who loved deeply in order to start building something new. You carry it, you honor it, and you keep walking. So here's a question I want to leave you with, and I want you to really sit with it. If you knew without any doubt that the love you're holding on to would never become a relationship, what would you do with your life starting tomorrow? Not what you'd feel. What would you do? Because that answer, that's your next chapter. If this video spoke to you in any way, please leave a comment below. Tell me where you are in this journey. I read every single one, and sometimes just knowing someone else understands what you're going through makes all the difference. If you haven't already subscribed, Love Psychology Secrets, now's a great time. We publish new videos every week on love, attraction, and the psychology that shapes all of it. Like this video if it helped, and I will see you in the next one.